Good morning. Welcome to second quarter safety meetings for Western Dairy. We have a guest today, guest speaker, Jay Knott, and he's from Lockton Companies. He's going to be doing our meeting today. There's a couple of things I want to go over with you first. I want to let you know we're doing safety jackpot again this quarter, and that means that you're eligible for a $200 drawing just for being here today. We're also doing a $1,000 jackpot at the end of the quarter, and you'll need to meet all the safety criteria in order to be eligible for that. We also have a door prize at the end of the meeting, so stick around after the meeting and we'll draw a name for the door prize. With that, I want to tell you that Jay's going to do the meeting today about personal injuries. We have personal injuries that they happen in any workplace, but we want to talk to you specifically about the injuries that happen most commonly at WDT. And like I said, Jay is going to do that for us. And with that, Jay.
Thanks, Elaine. Guys, thanks for taking part of your day to come out and come to the safety meeting. It's real important that you do that, and we're all glad that you're here. So thank you for taking the time to do this. I've got really two big topics to talk to you about. There's a lot of little details that we're going to be going over, but the most important point that I want to get across is some things that you need to do to be safe on the job here at Western Dairy Transport. We're really going to focus on drivers. Drivers are by far, there's more drivers than anybody else at Western Dairy Transport, and as a result, drivers are the ones that typically get hurt. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. But I'm going to really talk to you about some tips for safe driving, because injuries in truck crashes are really our #1 leading source of employee injuries at Western Dairy Transport. We're also going to talk about some common personal injuries that happen, falling from trucks, falling from ladders, things like that, that we'll talk about as well. So try to raise your awareness and give you some pointers on things that you can do to make sure that you stay safe on the job. So some of the things that you can do, as I said before, the #1 cause of serious injuries at Western Dairy is vehicle crashes. We've had some very serious injuries in the last year. We had a driver fatality up in Colorado where a truck rolled over and the driver was killed. We had a driver who was burned in an accident not too long ago. So I want to talk about that because as a driver, that's really the most likely way that you're going to be seriously hurt is if your truck crashes. So let's talk about ways that you can prevent a truck crash. So what increases your risk of a crash? Well, there's some specific things that you can do to really lower your risk of a crash. The first thing that you can do is make sure that you're not driving too fast for conditions. If you're driving too fast for conditions, you have a 3 times greater chance of having a crash. What does it mean to drive too fast for conditions?
Well, we're not able to stop in time.
Yeah, you can't stop in time. It might be heavy traffic and you're going faster than most of the traffic, over in the left lane maybe, and going faster than everybody.
Rain, snow.
It might be rain, snow, ice. Might be a dust storm or smoke that you're driving into. How about driving at night? What if you're driving so fast that you're overdriving your headlights and you can't see what's up ahead or around a corner? So that's all driving too fast for conditions. If you can maintain your speed control so that you're not driving too fast for the conditions, you reduce your risk by 300% of having a crash. Not driving when you're drowsy or sleepy. If you drive when you're tired or when you're sleepy, you also have about a 3 times greater chance of having a crash. So make sure you're getting enough rest, make sure you stay within your hours of service, and all that's geared to try to help you avoid driving when you're drowsy or sleepy. Taking your eyes off the road for more than 2 seconds. What does it take to get your eyes off the road for 2 seconds?
Pretty girl in the next car?
Pretty girl in the next car? What else?
Pick up your coffee cup off the floor.
Pick up your coffee cup off the floor. There's a wreck on the side of the road. There's something going on, on the roadside that draws your attention. A car skids out in the other lane. You look over that. It only takes about 2 seconds of inattention to get into a crash. So keeping your eyes on the road is absolutely critical. If you take your eyes off the road for more than 2 seconds, you're twice as likely to have a crash. The last thing that you can do is avoid aggressive driving and road rage. And that means not just other drivers, but this also means keeping your own temper under control when you're driving in traffic and some other driver does something crazy and cuts you off or something like that. And just making sure that you stay under control, and also that you have enough room around your truck so that you can react to another driver who is experiencing road rage. Okay, so those are some things that you can do. So make sure that you're maintaining a good speed that helps you maintain flow of traffic, a steady flow of traffic with other vehicles on the road. Get plenty of sleep before driving. Avoid drugs and alcohol, including over-the-counter medications before driving. Avoid distractions. And also make sure that you drive courteously. Use your turn signals. Use your horn appropriately. Allow others to merge. Things that you can do to try to minimize the likelihood of a road rage incident. And those are some things that you can do to really reduce your risk of a crash. Sir, question? All right. So let's talk about tailgating. What's the problem with tailgating? If somebody is right up on your tail, who's driving for them?
Sure.
You are, because they can't see around your truck, right? So if you have to lock them all up and come to a stop, does that guy have enough room to come to a stop?
Nope.
So it's really not the tailgating, it's the lack of space between the two vehicles, right? So let's talk a little bit about tailgating and what can happen. I've got a couple of videos I'm going to share with you here.
Truck up ahead of your driver, and this is why we put the camera on, because there's some following distance that we noticed. We're going to see if it happens again. You can see how close he is. We're going to move over again to the left. You're not going to stop a truck at that kind of a following distance. That is very close. Watch this lane change here behind this motorist. Follow that close in my car. Let's check it right here on this shadow. Start, stop. 5'9". I use the pothole instead. It look like a better reference point. That's his following distance. 5'9" is just about half of a second. What we're trying to show, check it here. Start, stop. 5'3". What we're trying to show you is some of the decisions that your drivers make could determine whether Cannon has to deal with a rear-end collision or an abrupt lane change collision to avoid the rear-end collision. 608397.
All right.
Start, stop. 60. Start, stop. 50.
Okay. Let's talk about that a little bit. What's wrong with that truck following that red or that yellow pickup truck and then that silver Pontiac so close? What's the problem with that?
No stopping distance.
There's no stopping distance. You can't see out in front of the vehicle. If that car has a blowout or for some reason slams on the brakes, there's no place to go, right? So we want to be sure that there's plenty of following distance out in front of the truck. The other thing I want to call your attention to is that video that I just showed you. That's done by I guess it's a group that does this, but it's called WatchMyTruck.com. And it's a bunch of individuals that go out and they videotape trucks. And they share the results on the internet. So be aware that there are people out there that are paying attention to what you do and maybe recording what you do. There's nothing that can be done to prevent them from posting the video up on the internet to make people aware of what's going on out there. So some things to be aware of. So let's talk about how long it takes to stop a vehicle. If you're driving in any kind of vehicle, I don't care if it's a motorcycle, a tractor trailer, a pickup truck, a car, whatever it may be, you're traveling a certain amount of feet per second. And let's say that you're going 60 miles an hour. that is roughly 90 feet per second. It's actually 88 feet per second, but just to make the math a little easier, let's say it's 90 feet per second. So for every second that you're traveling 60 miles an hour, your vehicle travels 90 feet, okay? So let's think about those 2 seconds of inattention. How far does your vehicle travel in that 2 seconds that you may take your eyes off the road?
80 feet, you know?
I'm sorry?
You say 90 feet per second?
90 feet per second?
Oh, 90 feet per second?
Uh-huh.
So that'd be 100 and what?
It's
80
about
feet?
180 feet, exactly. So 2 seconds, you've gone 180 feet. Anybody know how many feet long a football field is?
Not too many football fans around here.
A football field's about 300 feet.
Is it?
So in 180 feet, you've gone
Half.
more than half of a football field, okay? And that's in 2 seconds at 60 miles an hour. So that's why it's important that if you glance away for just 1 second, you've lost 90 feet of decision space. So when you think about stopping distance, there's really 3 components of stopping distance. There's 3 factors that go into it. One is perception distance. There's also reaction distance, and then there's braking distance. So let's talk about each of these factors. Perception distance is how far that your vehicle travels from the time that your eyes see something up ahead, that your brain decides that you need to do something about it. So let's say that you see a line of cars stopped up in front of your truck, okay? It's going to take about 3/4 of a second for your brain to realize, hey, I need to come to a stop here because there's a line of brake lights up ahead. Reaction distance is how long it takes your brain to tell your foot to get off of the fuel and onto the brake, okay? So that's also about 3/4 of a second. So how much time goes by before you actually start to bring your vehicle to a stop? It's almost 2 seconds. It's 3/4 seconds of perception, 3/4 seconds of reaction. That's 1.5 seconds, okay? Now let's think about that 90 feet per second that we just talked about. How far does your vehicle travel in that 3/4 of a second?
Half a football field.
About half a football field, right? About 135 feet, roughly. It's a little less than that, but about 135 feet. That space that you lose in terms of decision-making time and space to do something to avoid an accident. So the third component is braking distance. How long does it take your truck to come to a stop from the moment that you start applying the brake? How long does it take?
Depending how fast you're going, doesn't it?
It depends on a lot of different things. It depends how fast you're going.
I mean, weather outside.
Depends on the weather. If there's water, ice, snow, slush, mud, whatever it is on the road, that affects it. How about if you're loaded or unloaded, or if you have a partial load? You know, what if you have maybe a half load? Have any route drivers here? Let's say you have a half load on. What happens to that half load when you start to come to a stop? It surges forward, doesn't it? And that affects your stopping distance. How about if you're going up a hill? Does that increase your stopping distance or shorten it? It shortens it. How about if you're going downhill? It increases it, right? So the reality is we really don't know what that braking distance is going to be. There's a lot of different factors in that. So it takes us about 1.5 seconds to perceive and react to a hazard up ahead. The braking distance we really don't know, and all of those factors go into that stopping distance. Let's talk a little bit about braking distance. If you're driving at 60 miles an hour, you've traveled about 132 feet before your truck even starts to slow down. And again, that's lost decision space and lost space for your vehicle to come to a stop. That is about 6.6 pickup truck lengths. Okay? And a pickup truck, one of the trucks out here in the front, put 6 of those in a line. That's about how far your truck is going to travel before it starts to come to a stop. That's a lot. So I couldn't find the exact numbers on what it takes to stop one of the tractor trailers out here. There's just too many different factors in that. But I was able to find the stopping distance for a Ford F-150. A Ford F-150 pickup traveling 62 miles an hour in ideal conditions on a level surface takes 159 feet to stop. So about half a football field, a little more than a half, okay? And that's a pickup truck. So if you figure You're driving down the road at about 90 feet per second. It's going to take about 66 feet of perception distance, 66 feet of reaction distance, and then 159 feet of braking distance. And this is in a pickup truck. It's going to be about 291 feet to bring that pickup truck to a stop. Remember we talked about how long a football field is? It's 300 feet. So it's a football field's length to bring just that pickup truck to a stop. And again, that's under ideal conditions. For your tractor trailer, which is heavier, it has a lot of different braking surfaces, has a lot of different load factors that go into it. Do you think that's going to be longer or shorter? It's going to be a little bit longer, right? So that's real important to keep in mind. So what I want you to be sure that you do is make sure that you maintain an adequate following distance all the time. That's really managing the space out in front of your truck. The way that you do that is you have to count how much time there is between your vehicle and the vehicle up ahead. So what I want you to get in the habit of doing is when there's a vehicle in front of you, when that vehicle passes a stationary object like a bridge, a road sign, traffic light, something like that, start counting how long it takes until you pass that same stationary object. So what you're going to do when the vehicle ahead passes that stationary object, start counting 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, and so on until your truck passes that same point. Then you stop counting. If you're traveling less than 30 miles an hour, you need to have at least 4 to 6 seconds of following time between your truck and that vehicle up ahead. If you're going faster than 30 miles an hour, you need to have 6 to 8 seconds of following time. That will allow you to manage that space out in front of the vehicle so that you can come to a safe stop. Now you might ask, well, what happens if I have to swerve to the left or to the right? The idea of having that space out in front of your truck is you won't have to swerve. Okay? The only thing that would force you to have to swerve would be if somebody moves into that lane and comes to a stop and you've got to get around them. I don't want you to swerve unless you absolutely have to, for several reasons. What happens if you're driving down the road and all of a sudden you've got to swerve to the right over onto the shoulder of the road or into the borrow ditch on the side? If you've got a trailer on, what happens?
You can roll over.
You can roll over, you can jackknife, just like that, right? What happens if you've got to swerve to the left? Let's say you're out here on I-10 where you've got 3 lanes of at least 2 or 3 lanes of traffic. Well, you might hit somebody that's over in that lane off in your blind spot on the left side. What if it's a 2-lane road? If you swerve to the left, you're going to be swerving into oncoming traffic. And that's something that you don't want to do that. Okay? So the best thing that you can do is manage that space out in front. If you've got adequate stopping distance out in front, you can come to a stop, you can keep the unit stretched out, you can stop safely with an adequate following distance out in front of you. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. One of the things that drivers often say is, you know, if I keep that 4 to 6 seconds or that 6 to 8 seconds, people are going to pull in front of me. And yes, they will pull in front of you. And you know what? That's okay, because they're going faster than you are to begin with. What are they going to do when they get into that space? They're going to keep going, and they're going to get up on the bumper of the car that's ahead of you. And is that car going to be going fast enough for them? No. They're going to pull out of that space, and you now have your safe space out in front of the vehicle as well. Okay? So that's really important to keep that space out in front of the vehicle. It may mean that your truck is going slightly slower than traffic, especially in a heavy traffic situation like here in El Paso. But that's okay. That keeps that space out in front of your vehicle and really reduces the chance of you getting into that crash. So reasons not to tailgate. You need to have stopping space out in front of your truck. You've got to keep that unit stretched out, and you don't want to run into the back of the vehicle up ahead. If you're tailgating somebody, you can't make quick evasive action. You can't pull to the right or to the left or make the changes that you need to do to avoid a crash. You may influence the behavior of the driver ahead of you. What does that driver ahead of you, especially if they're in a small passenger car, what do they start to do if they look in their rearview mirror and all they see is the grill?
Worry, then.
Yeah, they might panic. They might slam on the brakes. That would really be bad, but it happens. So we want to be sure that you don't influence their behavior. If you're behind another truck, can you see what's out in front of that truck? No, you get this big billboard in front of your truck and you can't see around it. So you don't know what the driver ahead of you can see. You don't have time to take your eyes off the road for any reason. Remember we said if you take your eyes off the road for 2 seconds, if you're tailgating somebody and you take your eyes off the road for 2 seconds, what can happen?
You can hit them from behind.
You can hit them from behind, exactly, and we don't want that to happen. You don't have time to react. The vehicle up ahead may kick up a rock or some kind of road hazard that all of a sudden breaks out one of your headlights or one of your marker lights or cracks your windshield. And that can cause problems for you down the road as well. So make sure you keep that stopping space out in front of your vehicle. I've got another video that I want to show you that shows stopping space. And this is in a passenger car. And it's actually filmed in New Zealand, but I think it's a pretty good video to take a look at here. I need to press play, don't I? There we go. That was a little choppy video there, but I think you got the idea that the faster that your vehicle's going, the more stopping distance you need out in front of it, right? All right, let's talk about distractions while you're driving. You know, one of the things that I think the DOT has recognized is that drivers that use handheld devices, whether it's a cell phone or another kind of device, are much more likely to get into crashes as drivers that aren't. And so they've made some changes recently in the regulations that you can't use a handheld cell phone or texting device while you're driving. The most common violations that drivers that are using cell phones is failing to reduce speed. This is when the driver's going from interstate speed into a speed zone or a work zone, and all of a sudden the speed limit changes. If the driver's on the cell phone, they're not seeing that speed limit sign change, and as a result they get stopped. Traffic signal violations. The driver may run a red light or run a stop sign, speeding. I think the issue there is, again, they don't see the speed limit sign, so they just keep going at the same speed they were at. Following too closely and failure to yield. These are all things that distract the drivers and can cause a crash. So these are the reasons that the DOT has put some regulations in place around using cell phones and other handhelds, and the companies have done that as well. From a distraction standpoint, there's three types of distraction. There's visual distraction, there's manual distraction, and there's what's called cognitive distraction. What do you think visual distraction is? That's when you see something, that accident on the side of the road or that billboard or something that takes your eyes off the road for those 2 seconds, right? And again, we've already talked about what can happen in those few seconds that you take your eyes off the road, but that's visual distraction. Manual distraction is anything that takes your hands off the wheel. What could take your hands off the wheel while you're driving?
Answering your phone.
Answering your cell phone?
Yeah.
Reaching for your coffee mug? Reaching for your cooler that's now just slid across the floor? Reaching for a map maybe? That's manual distraction. That takes your hands off the wheel. Cognitive distraction is when you take your mind off what's going on. So cognitive distraction, you might be distracted by something that's going on at home, something that's going on at work. Maybe you're late for your next stop and you're trying to figure out how to make that up. But those are the things that take your mind off of the task at hand, which is getting from point A to point B safely. The worst kind of distraction is when you have visual, manual, and cognitive distraction all at the same time. So we want to avoid that, okay? So if you got a lot on your mind, your cell phone rings and you're trying to reach for your cup of coffee, you've got a pretty good chance of having a crash if that happens. So Western Dairy's put some policies in place on using cell phones. I know you've all signed the policy probably at the last quarter's driver safety meeting, but Western Dairy's policy is drivers are not allowed to use handheld mobile phones or push-to-talk cell phones while driving. Drivers are not allowed to reach for, hold, or dial a mobile phone while driving, while stopped on the highway for traffic, or while waiting at stoplights or stop signs. That's pretty clear. We just don't do that. It is okay, however, to use a handheld cell phone if you're safely and legally parked in an area that's okay for parking tractor trailers, or if you're communicating with law enforcement. You're either reporting an emergency or something like that. That's allowed as well. You can use a hands-free device, but if you use a hands-free device, that device has to be within your reach when you're in the driver's seat wearing your seatbelt. So if that hands-free device is over on the passenger side on the floor, is it okay to look down and try to reach for it? No. If it's in the sleeper, you can't use it. Also, that device has to be able to be dialed by striking just one button. So if you have to dial 2 buttons or more to dial that device, you can't use it. Okay? So those are the conditions under that. It is okay, though, to use CB radios. That is allowed. Okay? Any questions on the cell phone policy? Penalties for using a cell phone. Under DOT regulations, you can be fined up to $2,750 for using a cell phone while driving a tractor trailer. The company, if the company allows you to do that, the company can be fined up to $11,000 per time that happens. Under Western Dairy's policy, if you're caught using a cell phone, you're subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination. So it's pretty important to stay away from that. And I do want to share with you a video on cell phone use as well. It has some pretty good information on it here.
three primary types of distractions. Manual physical, that is anything that takes your hands off the control of your tractor. Visual, anything that takes your eyes off the road. Mental, anything that takes your mind off the road.